Sarah Newberry is a professional licensed massage therapist and instructor, and she's developed an option of support for women from, or not women, people from conception to labor massage and then postpartum care, and teaches this to other massage professionals. And as Sarah personally continues her journey through motherhood, she's connected with other mothers across the country and has become certified in facilitating Mother's Circle. These circles combine community, nervous system health, and archetypal wisdom. Sounds beautiful. And today, Sarah's here to talk about motherhood as a path to healing. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, I know that you have personally gone on a healing path through motherhood. Do you want to tell us a little bit of your story?
Yeah, it's like where to start.
Mhm.
But essentially, a little background about me is I have four children, um,
Mm.
and currently they are 9, 6, 3, and almost 18 months.
So you're in the heat of it.
We're in the thick of it,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be able to talk about motherhood without talking about my own mother and losing my mom. She died while I was pregnant with my second child. So that sort of catapulted me into a big what is going on, what's happening, and how do I feel better when I feel terrible in an
Mm.
understanding way, right? Like my mom
Yeah.
died. It's an
Yeah.
understanding way to feel terrible. Um, so that really put me on this fast track to feeling better because it's really hard to mother while you're grieving, and it's really hard to
Yeah.
mother when you feel terrible. Um, and a lot of the places that I was looking for healing or looking for connection and looking for just feeling better, um, there was a lot of, yeah, motherhood sucks, deal. And my
Mm.
personality is like, no, that's not good enough. I'm not here to suffer through motherhood. I chose to have my children, so I want to choose a, this isn't to say like motherhood isn't hard at times, of course,
Right.
but I'm not here to suffer through it.
Mhm. Mhm. No martyrs here.
That was definitely
Yeah.
my Catholic upbringing, and that was very much the visual I had or the modeling I had, and I was like, I'm choosing something different. I want to be different. I want to be a different mom than that.
Hmm. That right there is a very healthy start, right? Like deconstructing the modeling and choosing a new path.
Yeah.
So I know that, there's this narrative that and some people get lost in it that it motherhood consumes, right? It's everything, and then a lot of people, they kind of lose their identity as a parent. It's just all parenting all the time. And then I know personally, when I was in the thick of it, like, I didn't have any, like, extracurriculars, right? It was 100% kids all the time, and the first time I stepped out of the house and did something, it was, like, an amazing amount of guilt, and also, like, very eye-opening into who I was on the inside that I wasn't giving voice to.
Mhm. Mhm. Um.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you to if you had anything you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that through a lot of my studying, the physiological understandings of pregnancy and postpartum, and also our cultural expectations of pregnancy and postpartum, we have this idea that like we need to return to who we were. And
Hmm.
what I'm finding is that what we're actually experiencing is a grief of who you once were, and the pressure that we put on people in the postpartum period that, will you get your body back or return to who you are, is
Mm.
actually really doing us all a disservice, because we'll never return to who that person was. We're
Mhm.
actually a new person, and that new person needs to be collected from the culture. It needs to be received from the culture as a new human, as a new person. And that, I think, I mean, there's so many layers to like doing motherhood and postpartum better
Mhm.
than we are, but that piece just alone could change a lot of people's experience.
Yeah, I think that if I had really gone through, the postpartum and the birth process as you know, kind of like a mindset of it's a rebirth for me as a person, I think that that would have been huge. And something about that makes me wonder and feel like maybe perhaps ancient cultures used to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We can look at a lot of cultures across the world, and there's some very key pieces to caring for mothers in the postpartum period. And, you know, we barely do any of them here in this culture in America. Um,
Yeah.
it, so yeah, we can definitely learn a lot from um, other cultures, other ways of being, and even like some more indigenous cultures for sure.
Mothers in general, postpartum and beyond, lack quality support altogether.
Mhm.
Like, it's just not there. It's not there from society. It's not there from culture. It's not there from workplace or, partner or, I mean, some partners are better than others, right?
Sure.
um, but, it's just like you're just thrust into this experience with these kids that are reliant on you 24/7. And we always talk about the mental load that mothers have. And it's like, how can we actually better support these mothers in a community?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that you know, I sometimes I wonder, and like, is this just what I'm seeing because this is what I'm interested in? But it does
Mhm.
feel as if there's a collective shifting from, you know, we used to really focus on like productivity and like that's your worth and all those things. But I
Mhm.
feel like then there was this wave of self-care. But what we're also realizing is that, well, self-care is really hard to attain if you don't have a community to bring together to support
Yeah.
yourself. So
Yeah.
I think that leaning into community care is really um, the key to self-care,
Mhm.
if that can
Yeah.
make sense.
I mean, that's the whole basis of the foundation for the Shine Summit, because as I've been known to say in these past couple months, that if you have an empty well, you can throw a couple of cups of self-care in there and you're not going to fill it. Even if you did it a couple times a day, every day, right? But if a community all threw in a couple of cups, well, then that water level will rise. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
I love that visual too of, really everyone putting in what they can.
Mhm. Yeah. So so the community, how can we support mothers better? What can we do?
Well, I think that it's understanding that the the seeds of wellness, the seed of well-being in our generations start with the care of mothers.
Mm.
Really begins with tending to mothers in different ways than what we're used to right now, which can look different for like a lot of different people. There are, some universal basic needs that every postpartum person is going to need or want. And I also think those needs look like a recipe for just a really good life. Now,
Mm.
that being said, we really have to um, look at community and like how do we allow people in our lives? Does that mean we've kind of gotten to this place where like we all live in silos? I'm gonna cook my dinner over here. I had a client paint this picture for me and I just thought it was really great. She's like, I'm cooking dinner in my house, and a friend of mine is cooking dinner for her kids in her house, 4 houses down from mine. And why are we all so separate when we could
Yeah.
be cooking together? And from a lot of previous traditions, previous cultures, even here, um, that was much more of a normal thing than it is today.
Mm.
So it's simple things. It can be simple things like cooking together. It could be
Mhm.
simple things like, um, a lot of people talk about how difficult it is to ask for help. I have 4 kids and no parents, and I don't like, I live in a city with no family. Like, I've had to get really comfortable with asking for help.
Mhm.
And it still feels hard and awkward every time I do it. But
Sure.
when my kid needs to get to soccer and I'm still working or, whatever the situation is, I'm going to have to lean on someone to help me out. And I
Mhm.
think when you're forced into that uncomfortability of asking, you see how well you've been received because people are not like, oh, she's always asking. No, it's, oh my gosh, oh yeah, of course, like not a problem,
Yeah.
but we don't have that kind of experience because we're all too afraid to ask.
Yeah. You know, I was in a group for stay-at-home moms, and you would think that there would be a little bit of support. And the support was more like, well, someone's had they did do support when someone immediately had a child, like, oh, we'll do a little meal train, you know, maybe collect some diapers or something, and that kind of thing. Closer and more intimate relationships within the moms club, they'd offer to take care of your kids and stuff. So it did provide some support, but I think at the time, 'cause I'm a bit older and the culture is shifting now, but back then, it seemed like it was more of like a, shared complaint fest, like
Yeah.
everyone just kind of got together and talked about what wasn't working and how tired they are and, some of their parenting horror stories. And like, you didn't want to be a newly pregnant mom around any of these women, because the stories that they come up with. So, um, you know, how can we like continue to like it is hard to ask for help. So how can we kind of preemptively offer in a way that would be received and
Yeah.
utilized?
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so I agree with you. To share a little story of my own experience. When I grew up, my mom had 2 sisters, and we all lived about 15, 20 minutes apart from each other. But it was a regular occurrence for her sister to come over and just start doing the dishes while
Mm,
mom was like finishing up the meal or whatever. It was like she would just jump in and kind of do it. And
love
so
that.
that was my experience as a child to
Yeah.
see my mom and her sisters really like it wasn't even support. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to come over and help you wash your dishes. It was just like, this is how we act. Like, this is how we interact with each other. And
Mhm.
I think that when you're in postpartum, especially in early postpartum,
Yeah.
um, you're really having a hard time locating yourself and let alone like your needs. How can you
Yeah.
say I need sleep or I need food or I need whatever whenever you're like, what just happened to me? Like there's something major that just happened, you know? So I think sometimes it's just the knowing what someone needs, and that it's easy to Google some of that stuff, you know, or
Yeah.
call me or something like that, you know. Um, but I think that it's a matter of like stepping in and saying like, you know, it's almost like imposing upon their own
Yeah.
needs because it's too much. Talk about the mental load, like it's too much work for a person, and especially early postpartum, to be able to communicate what their needs are. You know, and even like with my kids, there's a lot of like choice being happening. You know, do you want blueberries or do you want almonds? Like, or do you want
Mhm.
yogurt or do you want eggs? Like, you know, if that's what it kind of takes to like to really show up for someone in postpartum, I think that's some pieces that's a start. You know, like that's the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Hearing you talk about, immediate postpartum in particular and having a hard time like really discerning what we need in those moments, it reminded me of conversations around depression and how when we're really in the thick of it, we can't really discern what we need and what would help us. But making that plan ahead of time, so do you think it would help people who are connected with someone who's pregnant coming to the end of her pregnancy to kind of make a plan of action of like, okay, well, we know you're going to need help with dishes and laundry, and we're going to also put together some meals for the first week, and you need a bath, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think being um, preemptively prepared is a good idea. However, I also hear from people who are pregnant is like, well, I have no idea what I'm gonna need. And like there's some
Yeah.
truth to that, right? Like because every
Yeah.
baby is different and like once you have more than one, then you're dealing with like how do I take care of my other children while I'm trying to take care of myself and get to know this new baby's needs.
Yeah.
Um so I think I mean I really do believe that a lot of our postpartum depression comes from that lack of locating yourself, locating
Mhm.
who you are now. It comes from a lot of lack of support and that and that we don't talk about it enough and you know that we're not being received again from our
Mhm.
community as something as I went through a big life event. You know, when I remember the first time I had a child and I remember like coming home and everything seemed to be like HD. You know, I was just like everything was
Mm.
whoa, the flowers outside were brighter. It was my first son was born in the spring. So it was just like everything was amplified. And I also remember the first time I went to the grocery store and being like, wow, this is all just still the same. And
Mm.
nobody's noticing what, you know, like an awesome job. I just birthed a baby, like recognize this, you know.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to like yell that because everyone was just kind of going about their day, which I mean, of course, how would they know? But that's the kind of energy that needs to be that a postpartum person needs to be received with like, whoa, that was amazing. You know, like you really look at what you did. It's kind of just that acknowledgement of like what you just went through something really big. It's a really big deal. It's not nothing. It's huge actually.
I really am enjoying this conversation because I mean you're low key talking about a cultural shift, like
Yeah, totally.
even beyond anything we've experienced so far. Kind of back to some of our, older practices and I just think that's amazing. Like I would want a community that cares about each other to that degree to where they're like, "Wow, you're a rock star. You just pushed an actual human being out." Like and look
Yeah,
at you walking around days later, like yeah.
it's amazing. It's really
Yeah.
and I think that postpartum, if we truly saw pregnancy and postpartum for like what it is, and we received our mothers in this way, um we could also begin, and this is why I say that tending to our mothers can change the world, is that when we tend to our mothers this way, we can start to see how that can change a lot of other things. Like, I mean, I work with a lot of people in their bodies, and I think about people who've had like hip replacements or something, where it's like,
Mhm.
you went through something huge. Like, this is not like hip replacements specifically have changed so much over the last few years, where it's like you get up and walk the same day you've had surgery. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, like, can we just stop and acknowledge that for a moment? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. It's awe, and awe is a precious, precious, experience to have because we've seen it all, we know it all, we do it all, like awe, like taking a moment and to pause and
Mhm,
experience awe is just one of the most enlightening, I'll say, emotions that we can have.
mhm,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
And, with this conversation, I also want to put in two really important things, is that we think, especially in this culture, we think that postpartum is like 6 weeks. And there's some truth to
Mhm.
that, right? But postpartum is truly like forever. It's like for life. We're always in postpartum. It's just different experiences with postpartum and different expressions of postpartum.
Mm.
And that's the first thing. The second thing is there's always the opportunity for repair, right? Like, I didn't get everything that I should have or wanted in my postpartum. To be honest, even my most recent one, you know, my most recent birth 18 months ago. And it's because like the culture doesn't really support it. But there's always the opportunity to repair for yourself, for your family, for your children.
Mhm.
And I think that feels really hopeful to me. That feels really promising. And I've done a lot of that work, since then. Um,
Mhm.
and I just want to say, like, anyone listening, if you're sitting here saying, wow, I didn't get that, and I wanted that, and I should have had that, yeah, you should have. You should have had the basic needs. And there's always the opportunity to repair that for yourself.
Mm. How would one go about repairing that for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that being with people who feel similarly that I do about repair and about postpartum, I think that is a really great place to start. Start asking questions. How can I repair and go back and receive those gifts that I should have been given?
Mm.
Um, the work that I've been doing with Mother Circle, while it's not necessarily postpartum repair, there is a lot of um, motherhood resolution that's happening,
Mm.
where we go through an 8 session togetherness, where we follow some structures and some reflection on like who you are now. And right now I'm at the middle. We're like in the fifth session of the 8 sessions, and people are really having this, like, just scratching the surface of like, wow, this is possible. And
Mm.
then there's like avenues to follow. If you're like, wow, this is what I really need to feel more powerful, more strength, more voice, more agency in our lives. There's people who do this kind of work, who really do postpartum repair. And I mean, you don't
Mm.
have to work with somebody; you can do it yourself. There's lots of ways. It's kind of like, what is your experience, and how do you want to repair it?
Well, that's one of the ways how, like, to me, the culture needs to shift because I hadn't heard of postpartum repair until this conversation. So, that'd be interesting for me to go back to my first child 25 years ago and do some postpartum repair on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be something when I cross that bridge.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me when you do these circles and you talk about not just community, but like nervous system health and archetypal wisdom, like what are we talking about in terms of like the archetypal wisdom? Could you give some examples of that?
Yeah. I think that, well, those two things go together, nervous system health and archetypal wisdom, because,
Mm,
nervous system health deals a lot with like locating yourself within yourself, both inward and outward, right? And that's like a whole thing we could talk about, right? But um,
yeah.
when we're looking to locate ourselves within our motherhood journey, I really feel like using archetypes allows us also to see ourselves in story.
Mm,
So a lot of people have heard the archetypes like maiden, mother, crone. That's pretty
mhm,
common, like, understanding. In Mother Circle, we introduce a fourth archetype called the Virgin, and it actually goes maiden, mother, virgin, crone, which sounds
mm,
weird because that's not what we normally see it as. But there's a way that we present this that makes perfect sense. But there's a stage in between motherhood and crone that is this powerful woman that's like, I birthed that baby, I'm raising this child, and now I see myself as a whole person that is whole and unto myself. It's like
mhm,
the virgin forest, like the potential is there. That's where
mm.
we start to just not care about things. It's kind of that, like, I'm gonna show up in whatever I'm wearing because I don't care. And it's
Yeah.
not to say that, like, that's the only, like, thing about the virgin archetype, but I think that I like to say it like you're hiking up a mountain, okay? The maiden is at the bottom of the mountain and she's kind of like, woohoo, let's go do this. Really naive, not really understanding what's about to happen. If you've ever
Mhm,
been a mountain, you're like,
mhm,
oh my God. And then the motherhood is that journey. It's that hike up, right? It's the hard work. It's the energy that it takes to get there. The virgin is standing atop the mountain, looking back and going, "Whoa, did you just see what I did? I hiked up that mountain. Like, I am
Yeah.
so badass." And then the crone is at the bottom of the mountain with her hand up to the virgin saying, I got you. Let me show you the way.
Mhm.
So I think that locating yourself in stories like that, that's like a little bitty story, but like locating yourself in stories like that, that's a lot of archetypal wisdom. That's a lot of mythic understanding. That's a lot of like people who used to gather around the fire in a circle would share wisdom and stories for feeling safe. This is how
Yeah.
I know I feel safe because I'm seeing myself in another person.
Mm.
Um, s- that's a little bit of archetypal wisdom and how we can use it for healing and repair.
I love that. I'm a virgin now, officially.
Yeah,
Some people might be surprised to hear that, but yeah, and but it's true. Like there's this like we haven't had a really good means or way of identifying this transition from motherhood into cronehood. It's just like jump right there, but there is definitely a spot in between, and I'm in it. So
yeah,
thank you for for bringing that up. You
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So, when it comes to supporting the mothers in our life, um, why does supporting them change the trajectory of our future and for everyone?
Well, again, this goes back to like, is this just what I'm paying attention to, or is the collective really shifting in this way? I feel as if a lot of people are talking about generational trauma right now, and
Yeah.
you know, that line, healing that line. And I think about that image of like it's some meme, where it's like the line of speaking badly to your
Yeah.
child, and there's that shield. And it's like, yes, we can change the trajectory of next generations by healing ourselves and thus creating a new relationship. Like my mom is dead, my grandma's dead, but I have created a new relationship with both of them through the healing work that I'm both doing and facilitating. So
Mm.
I think that while they're not here to receive that tangible healing, they're receiving that tangible healing without them being here. I don't know.
Yeah.
That gets a little
Yeah.
wooey, but hopefully that
Well,
makes.
it's like, I can see now, like, if we were to effectively support moms, because one of the biggest things is just being overwhelmed and chronic overwhelm, right? And chronic exhaustion. And then having that result in poor choices as a parent.
Yeah.
And so if we're like loving up on these people and supporting them to the best of our ability, then they're going to be able to be more effective and make better choices as parents. Yeah. And the generational line, I think that I mean, it is a little woo, but I do have a tendency to believe that that's a thing because, as we heal in our perception, our perspective of our mothers, then, I gotta think that that somehow positively impacts them. I mean, I know it positively impacts the children, but,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was going to say that too, is like, I was talking about the healing line going, backward, if you will, but like the amount of healing that that's done for my children and myself. And I can attest to being, you know, a much better citizen, a much better productive member of society because I'm doing the healing work to repair. But I also think, that I think a lot of times in our culture we just think you'll you'll get back to whatever you were doing before you had children. And I just think that why do we need to wait until our kids are like 18 or something? Like what's the line? There is no real line, but when we start to support mothers in the way that they need, I mean, from the moment someone becomes pregnant, we don't have to wait till postpartum to support them. It's
Mhm.
it's changing our perception of the importance of parenting, honestly. Um,
Yeah. Aside from just creating babies or, adding to the population or whatever, like, you know, tiny microscopic understanding of what we're actually doing. Yeah. I think
I
it does get played down quite a bit, and like, and then rolled into a lot of like nonsense as far as like political jargon and stuff. But this is it's not just like bringing babies into the world, it's like raising adults that
Mhm.
are healthy, functioning, productive members of society, And I think that I didn't realize when I had kids that I was raising adults until
Right?
my oldest was 16 and was like, "I can't wait to move out." And I was like,
Wait a
"Okay,
second.
let me raise an adult now."
Yeah, I think that I think that even non-parents or people who are not interested in parenting could understand that this is a really important time in someone else's life, even if they're not choosing that for themselves. I also think that, you know, one thing that I experienced as I became a mother was it really forced me into a certain disposition and a certain cycle of my life, if you will. I, I could totally talk like five elements and yin yang and these things as well. But essentially, what that means is, you know, we have bleed cycles, and that cycle is happening all the time. And a lot of times we're just meant to act as if we're the same all the time. And I feel like
Yeah.
being being a parent, being a mother specifically who sees that cycle physiologically of the pregnancy, the labor, the delivery, the postpartum,
Mhm.
now we start to be kind of like slammed into nature. We're slammed into nature, and all of a sudden you're going, wait, I've been told to just like kind of ignore this cycle. Now I can't ignore the cycle anymore. The cycle
Mhm.
is there and it's running the show, you know?
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
feel like um parenting, motherhood specifically is hard to locate yourself again when you're now living with a cycle that has always been there, but you've been working against nature this whole time. You've been working against it by saying, I don't I don't have this cycle. Like I'm still just as
Yeah.
productive as I was. And what happened to me was I was kind of forced into a yin way of life. I was forced into that, like, now I need to like hole up and cocoon and snuggle my baby, and that was totally not who I was at all
Mhm.
pre-children. I was like running a business, and I loved that young energy and I loved the exciting part of it, and then I woke up and was like, well, I have this baby, and like I have no relating with myself anymore. And so
Mm.
it was really, I think that that's happening a lot. And that's
Mhm.
one of those things that like contributes to um, people feeling depressed and anxious and unease during this postpartum period. When I really think if we were truly like living with nature, living into nature's uh, blueprint that has been laid out for pregnancy and postpartum, we could actually see postpartum as like a valuable, nourishing time rather
Mm.
than this idea of you're just going to have to suffer and it sucks and you're going to be bleeding and it's just crazy. And it's really like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
there's this opportunity for you to be tended to
Yeah.
if the culture would allow that.
Yeah. Wow. Just like giving us so much to think about for sure. And I like how we're talking about the identity piece because it's so pertinent, and I am looking back from my, almost top of the mountain, that there have been a series of identity crises, right? In
Absolutely.
my life, and one of them was when I had my first child, and then, you know, and one of them was last year. That was a big one actually, and so I think we need to like talk about this death and rebirth of the identity that we've given ourselves and the rediscovery of, well, who I am now, you know? She's in there somewhere, but who am I now?
Right.
Um, yeah. So
Well, and I pose the question because I'm constantly in inquiry myself about all of this, right? But I pose the question of, you know, with a big life event like a child being born and that identity crisis, because absolutely I felt the same. If we allowed postpartum to guide that crisis or that identity questioning,
mhm.
as we get older, as we go through more life experiences, what would be potential of the postpartum period um, being a guide for the next identity crisis? Because, like, we're kind of using the
Yeah.
term a little loosely because I'm sure it's not just a crisis every time, but like anytime we have those transitions in our life, if we could
Mhm.
use the postpartum period as a guide to how to nourish ourselves when we're going through big life events,
Mhm.
what would that be like, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And my part of my archetype is just like doing the phoenix. Well, if I see, part of my perceptions of my self identity crumbling away, well, it's a death and rebirth cycle for me, and so in some kind of way. And um, so I like dive in and then kind of fish around. Well, who is this person now, and what's going on here, and but I can see how that would work if we were relating it to the postpartum thing too, if we really utilize some of those lessons and understandings and inquiries, like you said.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So tell me, you started out as a massage therapist, and you've done some trauma healing work, and obviously motherhood. How did you marry all of that together, like into this like beautiful offering of the mother's circle?
Well, I think I'm still trying to figure that out. But I will say that Mother Circle and becoming a Mother Circle facilitator is based off the works of Kimberly Ann Johnson in the Fourth Trimester, which is a postpartum book
Mm.
that has changed the landscape for postpartum healing in general. But before I was even introduced to her work specifically, I noticed there was understanding stress is like my specialty as a massage therapist, and understanding trauma and nervous system health so totally go together so well, right?
Yeah.
And then as I went through my own birth experiences, and I mean, I had like these natural, beautiful, like expansive birth experiences. And one of my best friends is a midwife and a doula, and like we would talk about this experience, and she was like, "How do you know how to birth like this?" And
Mm.
a lot of it was understanding oxytocin,
Mm.
understanding the up and down of hormones and the brain body connection, nervous system health. And so really I think whenever I started doing labor massage and creating my evidence informed pregnancy massage course that I teach to other massage therapists, it's really drenched in understanding that people, especially first time pregnancies, right? They have no idea how to relax because we're in
Mhm.
America and everyone
Mhm.
is stressed out, right? And so we don't practice relaxation while we're pregnant. We don't practice relaxation even before we get pregnant, but so we need to start early to notice the shifts in our nervous system when we're activated, when we're not activated, when we're downregulated. And that is so all this stuff goes together so well for me,
Mm.
in my opinion, because it's like
Yeah.
the stress response. This is why massage is considered stress relieving, because we're
Mhm.
talking about oxytocin. We're talking about practicing relaxation. We're talking about gathering information um, about our bodies so that we can know where we are and know what we need to know to feel better. Um,
Yeah.
I just got a massage today, and I shared with you before we started that I gave myself a concussion a week and a half ago, and I've been having some lingering physical things. And I was unsure if a massage was going to be a really good thing, but I laid down on the table. She's a friend of mine, so I was like, sharing what happened to me, and I was like, I don't really know how this is going to go. She
Mhm.
she starts touching me. I have some PTSD responses, and there's that like slow down, go forward, slow down, go forward. And for me, it was educating my system about what I needed to know. I was having a hard time locating myself in my own system because of this injury. So
Yeah.
massage, the touch piece of it, allows us
Mhm.
to actually see where we are. And so that's how massage and nervous system and trauma and pregnancy and postpartum, like I almost feel like they all have to go together. They just have to.
One of the things that I really like respect about you is just how incredibly well researched you are, and then you bring all that information into an amalgamation, right? And you bring that forward in everything you do, and like I just really admire that.
Thank you. That can be thanks to my neurodivergence.
Right, 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 right. A little
I'm just
hyper focus.
but yeah, no, I really appreciate that.
Neurodiversity win.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I really do appreciate that because well, for one, it's nice to be seen for like things that bring me joy. Understanding things bring me joy, Oh, the
Yeah.
like making those connections really like bring me a lot of comfort and joy. So it's nice to be seen for things that feel good.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there are some amazing massage therapists out there who maybe are a little less inclined to research. And so, there are some, misunderstandings or some, a lack of information. Could be a very, very great massage therapist and still like there is something to having this added knowledge and understanding, like you said, between the nervous system and all that. Because it is a somatic exercise to how to receive a massage. It is, as someone just the other day was on Facebook and asking, I just got a deep tissue massage and I'm feeling like I've felt great. And then I got home and I've just been so emotional. And I'm like, yeah, it's a
Hmm.
real thing.
Yeah.
Um, because you just never know what's gonna come out of those tissues. They say the issues are in the tissues, and it's not it's accurate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there seems to be in the massage world this like polarizing because it just seems like it's everywhere. But like there's this like, well, I either have to be all science all the way, or I have to be like all wooey and all that way. And I
Mhm.
see that like the two have to inform each other. There has to be a bridge because I have to be grounded. Like I'm a
Yeah.
Taurus, so I'm like naturally grounded. But like it just if it's too far up here, I'm like, okay, I can't even see what's going on. I'm like too far. So like I
Yeah.
gotta have a little bit of groundedness too in order for it to make all those connections for me.
Well, to me, that's part of being that bridge of understanding, right? That you can kind of like put a foot in each of those worlds and then translate from one to the other and then to other people. What does that mean? Um, yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that because I have experienced the extremes as well, and I've got some dear friends that kind of dabble in the extremes too, and I'm kind
Yeah.
of like, so this has been a just a wonderful conversation, very informative and very like it's almost like a reality check to me. It's a reference point for me. That it's making me want to look back, at those stories of those times that I gave birth and what happened and how I felt and what I experienced. And yeah, for sure. And then see how those instances, how those moments like affected me today, even because
Mhm.
I don't think really we give enough credit to them. And if
Mhm.
they're life changing,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. Well, I have another mother circle starting in January. Maybe you'll have to join me.
I mean, maybe, maybe. Thank you so much, Sarah. I just really love this conversation. If you would tell people how they can find you.
So you can find me on somaticsoulmassage.com. That's SOLE because I'm a barefoot massage therapist. I use my feet for most everything I do. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm kind of like, to social media, but the best way to stay connected is get on my newsletter. That's where I share all my information. And I do, yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I think it's soulful circles underscore STL. And that's where I'm talking about motherhood mostly.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you for your expertise and for sharing your experiences with us. And I look forward to chatting with you more in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.